Is there anyone out there who's made a career off the name Gordon Ryan?
That's me.
Modern Jiu-Jitsu is heavily influenced by Gordon Ryan, and we see Wagner trying to work Gordon's latest sprawl passing.
Wagner just looked at me and he's like, I'm trying to work your passing, I gotta lean into him more.
We also see Aaron Wilson doing a great job of securing the inside knee of his opponent by pinching his knees together, which looks very similar to what Gordon was doing in his recent match. We also saw Nicholas Meregali from the back on the underhook side trap the arm of Felipe Pena, and then use his hand to assist him in locking that bottom side body triangle. And this looks very similar to what Gordon did against Vinicius in the 2019 ADCC finals, where he traps the arm from the underhook side and uses a hand assist to lock a bottom side body triangle. And if you want to study this sequence a bit more, you can hop into the training resource and see where Gordon talks about this sequence in his instructional. And the basic idea is that from the back on the underhook side, if you trap your opponent's arm and try and lock a top side body triangle, you're going to give them space to free their arm. So Gordon advises to use a hand assist to lock a bottom side body triangle, which is exactly what Meregali did. And he even finished with a one-handed rear naked choke, which is exactly how Gordon finished his sequence. So it's very hard to deny the impact that Gordon is having not only on Meregali, but on Jiu-Jitsu as a whole. So at this point, you probably have a couple things on your mind. The first being, what the heck is this guy using to do all of his studying? Well, that would be what's called the Outlier database, and the link is down in the description. And when you sign up, you'll get access to the Discord, which has almost 800 Jiu-Jitsu nerds that are just like you. And the second thing on your mind is probably what has happened to Felipe Pena since his recent match against Gordon. Well, his stock has plummeted, but what we learned in that match is that pushing someone away may be an effective way to clear a collar tie, but it's not an efficient one. So I think a lot of people started to think about better ways of clearing collar ties. Here we see Nicky has a strong collar tie against Gracie, and Gracie uses an elbow pass to clear the collar tie and go directly into a single leg. Here we see again an elbow pass used to clear the collar tie, and he goes directly into a knee tap attempt, before connecting his hands in a body lock and securing the takedown. Now obviously completing a takedown would be ideal, but it can be as simple as using an arm drag to clear your opponent's grip while upgrading your own. And maybe while you're watching Power Bottom by Craig Jones, you stumble upon this section called Mexican Karate Arm Drag. And this looks very similar to the arm drag that Nicky just did in his match.
Like a bit of a karate chop, maybe a Mexican karate chop here. I'm trying to get an attack, but these arms are causing me issues. So we're hitting that Mexican karate chop and we're securing that far hip.
Now let's say we hit a beautiful elbow pass to clear their collar tie and we pick up a single leg. It can be extremely frustrating and tiring if we're trying different things and holding the leg for what seems like an eternity.
Approximately 10 hours later.
And eventually the defender's able to escape. So we need some reliable strategies to go about finishing this single leg takedown. And a framework that I've found to be very helpful is one that Danaher talks about in his standing to ground instructional. And that's the idea that it's not a good idea to hold on to a single leg for extended periods of time. Because if your opponent is balanced while you're holding their leg, they have a lot of counter options available to them. They have kimuras, they have leg entries, they have guillotines. So in general, Danaher recommends to run the pipe or use a cutback to complete the takedown right away. And you can see there's a resource about running the pipe as well. And we can see the first golden rule of running the pipe is the tighter our opponent's whizzer, the better running the pipe works. Now a strong whizzer just means that there's a lot of connection between the two players. And in this sequence, Victor Hugo is threatening a guillotine, which achieves that same connection as a strong whizzer, which makes it very easy to run the pipe. Now the second golden rule of running the pipe is it's easier when our opponent's foot is outside the line of their hip. And here we can see as Dan picks up the leg, he's running Victor Hugo backwards. And if we draw a straight line from Victor's hip down to the mat, you can see that his foot is outside of that line. So because Victor's foot is outside his hip and he's threatening a guillotine, which means he has strong connection to us, when we run the pipe, it's gonna look effortless. But if running the pipe is not working, we should immediately bring the leg up to the inside hip. And Meregali used this beautifully. Now I'll be the first to admit that my wrestling sucks. So the way I'm trying to ease this into my game is to first use Jiu Jitsu to off balance my opponent. So when I enter into these wrestling positions, hopefully I'll have a head start and it's the wrestling that allows me to complete the sweep. Now Jiu Jitsu wise, we're not looking for anything fancy and it can be as simple as a scissor sweep. But off that scissor sweep, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to immediately take top position. It's more likely that you're going to end up in some sort of wrestling scenario like a standing body lock. And if you can finish from these wrestling positions, that's what's going to allow you to complete your sweep and win the match. But if you hit a beautiful double ankle sweep that leads to a rear body lock and you're not able to capitalize, then you lose. Now this is not something I came up with, it's what Danaher talks about in his Sweeps and Reversal instructional. All I'm trying to do is link this instructional content with match footage to help you maximize your study time. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Nicky Rod's match with Yuri. It's clear that Yuri's strategy when playing guard was to stay supine to avoid the body lock guard pass.
A big problem you're going to see, I think, for Nicky Rod here is that if Yuri plays with his back on the floor, his waist isn't exposed. So that means he can't body lock him.
But in order to stay supine, you need to first recover your guard with your feet. And once your feet are in place, now you're free to prop up on your elbow.
Nice recovery. Hugo didn't take his hips off the ground, which was smart because then Dan would have locked his hands if Hugo tried to shrimp away. So he brought his feet back into the hips instead. Good play by Hugo.
But the problem is when Yuri felt his guard breaking down, he didn't recover first with his feet and instead decided to prop up on his elbow. So now there's waist exposure and Nicky quickly goes in for a body lock and completes the pass. And he does so by using the high hip method that Danaher covers in his no-gi guard passing instructional. And once he passed the guard, we saw him riding the legs quite a bit and using things like Dagestani handcuffs. And initially I thought this was a very deliberate strategy where Nicky wanted to go out and use Craig's power ride material. But it turns out Nicky was just a bit unclear on the rules.
I should have asked a question prior to the match. If I start attacking the back and the guy ends up on top hypothetically, would that be a sweep for the bottom guy? So it was my fault that I didn't ask that question, so I was unsure. Which prevented me from taking the risk of going for the back, which ultimately prevented me from getting the submission early on.
But for fun, let's just pretend this was a deliberate strategy and Nicky was trying to use different leg riding techniques that don't traditionally score under a jiu-jitsu rule set, but do a very effective job of pinning your opponent and taking their legs out of the equation, forcing them to take risks at the upper body and do things like build up to an elbow, with the goal of recovering their guard. But it can also lead to a Dagestani handcuff, which in Craig's opinion is one of the best positions to get to. And the basic idea is we're going to threaten a crossface. And to avoid a strong crossface, the bottom player will come up on an elbow prop. And when they do, it's going to give us the opportunity to take the Dagestani handcuff. But maybe we use the threat of a crossface to force them to an elbow prop, and we can't quite reach the Dagestani handcuff and the bottom player is starting to recover their guard. Well, they had to do so by initiating their guard recovery with their upper body, which often means there's going to be waist exposure and give us the ability to lock our hands and go into the signature body lock guard pass. And that's how we effectively marinate someone from top position. So both Gordon and Craig are pushing modern jiu-jitsu forward, and the amount of information they're putting out is a bit overwhelming. But as the outlier database is developing, I think that overwhelm problem is going to start to disappear, and your study time is going to get more and more efficient. And I know one thing a lot of people are studying right now is north-south guard passing, and I too am one of those people. So I'm working on that video, and I haven't seen the Aiga event yet, so I imagine there's some fun stuff in there as well. So I'm not sure what's going to come next, but subscribe so you don't miss it, and be sure to check out the link to the outlier database in the description below. And I'll talk to you in the Discord.